Life comes to you in perfect response to what you've got going on, and as it does, you are able to continually evaluate. Yes? So do you think you're overdoing your evaluating or underdoing it? You think you are paying too much attention to life or not enough attention? Do you think you're trying to figure it all out? In other words, getting out ahead of it. That's a big thought, isn't it? Because as much as you've already lived, there is so much that is before you. In fact, almost all of it is before you. Since you're eternal, that makes sense, doesn't it? So when we encourage you to get out ahead of it, was it sort of twisting your brain into a knot? Or did you not think about it at all? Esther thought about it incessantly. Getting out ahead of it, getting out ahead of it. How far out ahead of it should I be getting? I can't get into the unknown with much satisfaction. She began to notice that she could be general in her getting out ahead of it. I expect to live happily ever after. But do you know what segment intending is? Segment intending is acknowledging that you've entered a new segment. And what is a new segment? It's a new block of time, a new period of being where your intentions have changed ever so slightly from the block of time or from the period of experience that was just before it. For example, if you were to get into your automobile, your vehicle, you've entered a new segment because your intentions have changed. Your intentions in your automobile, if you are driving, may be to be aware of where you're going, to be aware of what's around you, to be aware of the others around you, to be clear-minded, to be happy-hearted, to be flexible and connected and responsive and in love with life. In other words, some of these things you would want to include in every segment, but being in your vehicle includes different intentionality than sitting on your sofa. Yes? Choosing a movie, you're entering a new segment. Being in the movie, you've entered a new segment. Someone new walks into the room, you've all entered a new segment. You enter in a new room, you've entered a new segment. So if you are aware that a new segment has begun, then you can think about what your preferences are with that segment. Esther's daughter Tracy often tells the story. Esther heard her tell the story to her own children recently, that when she was in college, she was working as a waitress in a 50s diner. And most often on her way to work, which was 15 or 20 minutes, depending on traffic, not much traffic happening then, she would think about how glad she was to be there and about the customers that would be given to her in her section and how playful they would be, how happy to be in this playful environment they would be, how nice they would be to interact with, and how much fun she was going to have in interacting with them, and how nice it was going to be to interact with the cooks and the other people that were working in the restaurant. And Tracy noted that when she took the time to do that intentionality for that segment, that it always was a nice evening. But if she just got in her car and went to work and didn't get down the road a little bit with any intention, then she found herself, and this is really the point that we want you to hear, and then off we'll go into whatever you want to talk about. She would find herself reacting, not out ahead of it, reacting to it as it came. So when a not so pleasant customer would be seated in her section, it was hard not to react to it. Anyone would. But if you've gotten out ahead of it and you've asked for the kind of people that you want to interact with, You give the universe the opportunity to yield to you what you're asking for. Now, the universe is always yielding to you what you're asking for. So what good does segment intending do? Segment intending causes you to line up with what you're asking for. It causes you to contemplate what you are looking for. And you know, the specifics of a moment in time are really powerful. When teachers ask you to be present or to acknowledge the power of now, understanding segment intending would, by our estimation, be the very best way to get out ahead of it, to be a vibrational creator, to be preparing the vibrational atmosphere. But it's more about preparing the vibrational atmosphere within you. It's not about controlling the clients, although it does influence what happens. It's about you identifying what your point of attraction is going to be, so that in this segment of your experience, your point of attraction is going to be something that you have particularly identified that you want to emphasize. You see what we're getting at? And we would like you to, just for today, maybe tomorrow, and possibly for the rest of your life, think about getting out ahead of things in just that way. That here I am, new to this moment, but not so new to this moment. Here I am, old me, new to this moment. How much of old me is in this moment getting in the way of the new to me in this moment? How much of who I have been is active right now? And so how much am I regurgitating rather than getting out ahead of it? How much am I intending and how much am I just reacting to? And as you begin playing with this, what you're going to begin to notice is that you have a lot of control over what comes into your experience, segment by segment by segment by segment. So many things. The universe is cooperative, and the law of attraction is always gathering all of the cooperative components. But sometimes, if you're not paying attention, you are not identifying and dictating the components to which you intend to be cooperative. And since it's all about attraction, it's all about attraction, it's all about attraction, it's all about attraction, then don't you want to do whatever you can do to get out ahead of it so that you can be a vibrational offerer who attracts to you what you intend to attract, rather than someone who just sort of stumbles into a moment. That's what we call creating by default, and then reacts to the moment. Because sometimes, and you all are getting pretty good at this, you have your pals and you have your cooperative components already assigned, and you know who many of them are. You know who you can hang out with and who you can have a pretty darn good time with, because that's just who you usually are together. But we don't want you to be dependent upon any conditions for how you feel in the moment. We want you to get out ahead of it so that the conditions of your moment are responding to the vibration that you have chosen, rather than you waiting until it's extra hard and then trying to segment intend around the reaction that you're having to something. It's not easy to be a physical being in a world where there is so much for you to observe, because the normal human relationship with life is one of reaction. But a life of reaction is not a life of deliberate creation. A life of reaction is not being out ahead of it. A life of reaction is reacting to what is going on. That is not deliberate creation. That is creation by default. So, just thought we'd chew on that just a little bit at the beginning here, because when you decide that you are the creator of your own reality, and you acknowledge that the universe is cooperative and that you have the power to offer a vibration by deliberate intent, and then you practice it segment by segment, which is really easy. As Esther is thinking about getting out ahead of it, she sort of got lost in the out ahead of it. She spent a couple of days really contemplating, what is out ahead of it? How big do I want to think? The expansiveness of her future overwhelmed her as she tried to get out ahead, as she tried to think thoughts that she wasn't in very close proximity to. She couldn't make that jump. And so instead of it being an exercise of elation, like going through that portal that we described the other day, it was like standing at the brink of the portal, trying to stick her head through the portal and not knowing what was on the other side of it and not being able to connect with it all. And then she began asking the questions of us. Abraham, what do you mean? What exactly do you mean by getting out ahead of it? And we said, we mean only this simple thing. Don't react to life, plan it. That's all. Well, how far ahead can you plan? Well, in some cases, you planned being on this cruise quite a while ago, didn't you? Esther's pretty good at that. In other words, she picks dates and puts them on the calendar and knows you'll show up. And it's not hard to figure out the things that she wants to take place. In other words, she has a very clear template of the happiness that she wishes for all of you as you co-create together. So she can get out ahead of it in those ways. But can you really get out ahead of everything? Not really. Not really. Some of it you want to get closer until you decide. And so we just want you to digest your life in this delicious way. We want you to feel appreciative and thankful for what you've been doing in really general terms, and not get too detailed about why anything is or isn't happening right now. But from where you are, if you could just accept along with us the perfection of where you stand right now, and then just softly intend for the things that you would most like to experience in as best as you can figure out what the next segment of your experience is, you will discover a cooperative universe unlike anything that you've experienced on a consistent basis before. And before you know it, you will feel your directing, your soft, gentle, expectant directing of all things working out for you. Now, they always are. But when they work out as you have asked them to work out, ooh, that's when life begins to feel extra fun to you, you see. Observation can be nice. Reacting can be nice if the conditions are such. But if you allow yourself to be, we love you so much, a lazy responder to conditions, then you can as easily be a responder to a negative condition as you are to a positive condition. In other words, if you decide that you're just a reactor to what's going on, now you got to be like so many people try to be and can't be. You've got to control the conditions to which you are responding, and then everything gets all wonky. If you train yourself to be responsive to conditions, a conditional creator, then you get into that place where you have to control what's going on. And have you noticed you can't do that? You just can't control the conditions. So if you decide you're not going to be a conditional creator, you're not going to be a reactor or a responder, instead you're going to be a get out ahead of a you're going to be a segment intender You're going to be a flow of the energy and find the feeling of the energy that has flowed. You're going to be a painter of an image, a decider of how you want to feel, a stater of what's next and how you want it to feel. And you begin to see the power of that intentionality. Now you've got it forevermore about everything. You want life to come to you in bite-sized pieces, just like you want to eat your dinner in bite-sized pieces. It could all be there at once, and you could be given 13 seconds to ingest it, but it wouldn't be what you're really looking for. Bite-sized pieces, segment by segment by segment by segment by segment, all under your control, all responding to you, and you being right there because of your segment intending, because of your segment intentionality, because of your segment getting out ahead of it, because you thought about the segment right before you went. You thought about the segment before you got in your car, and then you thought about the segment once you were in your car, and you thought about the segment before you met up with your friends, and you thought about the segment while you were with your friends. In other words, you're thinking about it. You're giving the universe an opportunity to sync up with the very best of you, and it will. Now what? What do you want to talk about? Now what? Now what? Life has given you some things to chew on, hasn't it? You've had a wonderful few days. You're more alive than you were, ornerier too. It's all so good.